Welcome to the Set to Lead podcast, the online mentoring platform for emerging and current leaders. My name is Nike Anani, leadership coach and talent development expert, and I will be your host.
Before we get started with the conversation, here's a brief announcement from Marianne. Your team needs you. New hire onboarding, team communications, team management, team motivation, and the list goes on and on. How effective are your efforts to create a high-performing team? Grab the free Team Effectiveness Survey and Checklist and pinpoint areas where your team could improve. This will ensure your team always stays on track and you always shine. Grab it for free at settolead.com. Now, back to the show.
Welcome to the show, Nike.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited that you're here as well. The focus of today's show is going to be leadership lessons on leading a successful family business. Before we get started, though, tell the audience a little bit about your background.
So I am a family business owner. I'm a second generation based in Lagos, Nigeria, soon to be in Austin, Texas, as we were talking just before we went live. And I'm a business consultant, so I work with family business owners to cross that generational gap. So founders that have built up a business for a generation and want to see that it outlives them, that's where I come in. And how did I get into this space? My family business has been in my life all my life. And my parents started off our first business the year I was born, and here in Lagos, Nigeria. And so I've always, entrepreneurship, business has been a background in my life all my life. But at age 9, my parents decided to give myself and my brothers the best future that we would relocate to the UK for our education. So my mum, my brothers and I, we moved. And I went to university in London. I worked in corporate in Deloitte for a few years where I trained up as a chartered accountant. But you know what? I loved the environment. I love my colleagues, but the work itself was like putting needles in my eyes. That's how I describe it. It was just like, it was so inspirational. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, because all the while, whilst my mum, my brothers and I were in the UK, my dad was back in Nigeria building out the business. And I remember having a conversation with him, and he was saying that, you know what it is? He was like, you need to get out into the real business world. You need to get out of the office and get exposed to different things. Come and see Nigeria through a different lens and come and work with me for a bit. I'll introduce you to a few friends. You can shadow them for some time. Maybe you will learn what industry you're passionate about, and then you can go back to the UK and get your MBA or what have you. And that was 10 years ago. And I agreed to come for 3 months. And 3 months morphed into 10 years plus. I just loved it. I came back. I loved the entrepreneurial culture. It was just so energetic. There were so many opportunities. And it lit me up in the way that the City of London didn't. And I loved, initially it started off just like following my dad to meetings, asking questions, understanding the operations of the business. And by this point, he had started investing in other projects as well outside of our main business, and just observing that. And then over time, it then evolved into me being very entrenched in the business. I became a director and spearheaded setting up HR, finance, admin, strategy in the family business. And then I set up a coherent investment structure to manage a family's assets and investments. And yeah, that's how I got really slam dunked into the whole world of family business, family wealth. But I found it a very lonely journey. I found that there were no advisors on the ground in Nigeria that understood the niche that is family business. A lot of people were talking about the importance of corporate governance, the importance of process, importance of strategy, but there was no one on the ground here in Nigeria that was conversant with our culture, as well as conversant with the niche that is family business. So I found myself having to educate myself, go abroad to the States, to the UK for trainings, reading books, doing qualifications to become an advisor to be able to help my family navigate our generational transitions. And I also found it lonely because there was no community of family business owners. Lots of industry associations for corporates and just general business groups, but nothing speaking to how do you navigate that confluence between family and business, where family issues might impact on business and business issues might impact on family, dealing with succession planning, family governance, sibling rivalry, suppressed long-standing family issues, maybe like mental health issues or drug addiction, or planning for the next generation, having in-laws marrying in. Like, it's all quite complex, but there was no support. And yeah, so essentially, to cut a long story short, 3 years ago, I decided that I would help not just my family in navigating this generational transition, but others. And I would set up an association, a community of business owners where they could connect with one another, they could be educated, we could do research to find out what's going on with family businesses, and we could be the voice for African family business, essentially engaging in advocacy in government circles, both regional, continental, wide, and national levels. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this space is that businesses are key to building generational wealth. And in Africa, unfortunately, we've been plagued by a lot of poverty. And only 2% of family businesses in Africa will outlive the founder, compared to 33 globally. And so we have a lot of work to do in ensuring that we're building the foundations of these businesses so we see a generational transition, so that not only the family that owns the business have financial security, the employees have job security, and their families they're feeding off this ecosystem against this context of such high levels of relative and absolute poverty. And also, these family businesses are helming communities. And here in Africa, communities, it's through community activities that you lift people out of poverty. So that's my background.
It's a very interesting background. Congratulations on figuring it all out and sharing what you've learned with us. So I read some research that said only 30% of family businesses last into the second generation, and 12% are viable into the third. And as you just mentioned, it seems like those numbers are a little bit different for African businesses. Yeah. What are your thoughts on why that is?
You mean the differences between African and the rest of the world, or do you mean that 30 to 12?
Both.
Okay. Just generally, I think what happens is with family businesses, the business gets more complex over time. If you start up a business today, in 30 years' time, the growth pattern of the business is likely to be different. So the business might be phasing into a maturing phase, and so declining rate of growth of revenues and profits and what have you. And at that time, it's really important to think about innovation or new markets, new products, to essentially augment the earning capacity of the business. But just around that time, unfortunately, is when the founder will transition. So if we haven't had succession planning to groom someone that's next in line, or corporate governance to ensure that the business actually is a separate entity from the founder. Quite often in family businesses, what we see is there's a high level of founder centricity. So the head and the heart of the founder remains in his or her head and heart. And unfortunately is not documented, we don't create an institution out of it. And that makes it very difficult for someone else to step in and carry on where they've left off. And at the same time as well, the family is growing in size. So in generation one, for instance, say my family, there are 5 of us in my nuclear family. In a generation, my brothers and myself, hopefully we get married, we have kids, and you see that the size of the family grows exponentially. So what happens is, as this business is entering into a slower rate of growth and the family is growing exponentially, there are more mouths to feed. And so it becomes more and more difficult to keep the business going. And then in the African context, layered on top of that is the complexity of the African family. African families tend to be larger in size, whether we're talking about a nuclear family. We tend to have very large extended family that are quite involved in nuclear family activities. And then we've got this concept of kinship, right? I've got people that I consider my sisters, my aunties, my uncles. We're not related by blood at all. I don't know how we found each other, but they're my sisters and my brothers, and we cater for one another. And so what tends to happen is there are more mouths to feed in an African context. And then quite often we see a lot of polygamy is deeply entrenched in our cultural background. Unfortunately, with colonialism and the slave trade, we were told what to believe in terms of what our culture should be, what is right and what is wrong. And a lot of the time you find that whilst a lot of families might not have an official second wife, the patriarch might have a secret second wife. And yeah, so it gets pretty tricky when he passes on in absence of estate planning, a will, a foundation, a trust. And then you can see it's a recipe for conflict, infighting within the family. Who gets what? Who's going to take over the business? Where no one has been trained or has understanding of the business, where we see this high levels of founder centricity, it becomes even harder. So essentially, the key building blocks to seeing that we actually move businesses across from one generation to the next is succession planning and family governance.
So I'm going to get off track, I think, with my next question. But you mentioned polygamy, and I wasn't aware that polygamy was still strong in 2021. But in the context of polygamy, I would imagine, being that those relationships aren't legalized, they would have no rights to argue over family business rights.
So in the United States, it's not legal, but in many African countries, it is. Oh. So in Nigeria, for instance, 50% of us are Muslim. And in Islam, you can have up to, I believe it's 4 wives. Oh. And so northern part of Nigeria is ruled by Sharia law, which is the Islamic law. Southern part is ruled by separate law, but even customary marriages are recognized by the law. So over here in Africa, you find that it is legal. And what makes it complex is that, like I said, say, for instance, heaven forbid, you're married to your husband and, you've got your 2.4 kids and, you think it's just the two of you and you're fine. Unfortunately, he passes on. And then I actually saw this happen. A friend of mine, she lost her father. And so he passed away, and it was just his wife and the 3 kids. She was one of 3, and they were all daughters. And when he passed away, another lady just surfaced and she was like, well, I'm his second wife and I have 3 boys for him. Huh. And well, in the state where she's from, women cannot inherit property or real estate. And so there was a whole tussle because all that second wife, in inverted commas, wanted all the property and the business to go to her children, right? So you can see that where there's no full clarity, full communication, full transparency on who is family, because it can get quite philosophical in our context, it gives scope for conflict. And then what we really need is unity of vision, unity of purpose, unity of values to be able to transition the business from one generation to the next.
Well, thanks for that clarification. I appreciate it. If you're a part of the younger generation, can you be true to yourself and also tend to the legacy of a family business?
I believe you can. I believe it takes a lot of inner work. It takes a lot of conviction. It takes a lot of confidence in one's individual purpose. I believe that a lot of us are multi-passionate beings. Unfortunately, our education and our society have conditioned us to pick a box and tick that box. Are you an accountant, an engineer, or this or that? What if I'm all of it?
Right.
And I believe that actually, as we're entering into this new dispensation in our world, many of us will be forced to freelance, do 9 to 5, be an entrepreneur on the side, and be a philanthropist at the same time. And I do think it's possible to tend to the legacy of your family business, lending your voice, whether it's not necessarily as the new CEO of the business or working your way up, working in the business, but you can make an impact from the sidelines. My brothers, for instance, they were never active in the business, but they're very, very, you can feel their presence in terms of strategic direction, particularly when it comes to investments we make. And in any case, as you're moving from one generation to the next, as I said, for instance, we're in construction, and as the industry is, maturing, we need to become more and more strategic so we keep this business growing. So we need to think about new markets. We need to think about new products or services. We need to think about new joint ventures, new investments, innovation to kind of breathe life into it. And I think that's where young people can really make a stamp. Or even whether it's the family wants to start thinking about being philanthropic or wants to start up a family office, get into social entrepreneurship. I do believe it's possible to be true to you as an individual and also, serve the family business.
Awesome. What are some constructive communication strategies you would share with the younger generation that they can use with the older generation when discussing their future in the family business?
I would say it's to firstly get into the head and heart of the older generation. They're probably dealing with fear of their mortality. And quite often when you're younger, your time horizon is different. You're more focused on your future. Whereas the founder has a lot of anxiety towards them pulling away from the business or their mortality. And so is to have a lot of sensitivity towards that when you're broaching the topic of the future of a family business. And one can get around this by just language. So instead of talking about when you die, dad, when you die, mum, when you die, you can talk about the legacy of the business. It's a reframing. So what legacy would you like to leave in the world? As opposed to when you die and what have you. A lot of the time as well, founders are very lonely. They have no outlet to discuss the anxieties they have with respect to the family business. Sometimes they're plagued with which of the children am I going to pass this on to? Will this create issues in the future? My identity is wrapped up in this business. How can I pull away? So it's really about having deep empathy for that. And also showing appreciation and honor for all that they have built. Yes, there's scope for, constructive criticism, how to improve the business or how to ensure that the business crosses this generational line, but to not come off as a constant critic, because then they will shut down, heart and head and ears. And for me, what really changed things was when I came across the quote by Stephen Covey: seek first to understand, then to be understood. So really get into the head and heart of the founder, what they're going through, any idea that you're trying to put towards, any idea you're trying to table towards them should speak to what speaks to them. What are their priorities? What are their pain points?
Everything you said was wonderful, but the part about the fear of mortality resonated with me because I have older parents and I'm noticing the language shift I have to use with them. And I just recently started paying attention to that fear of mortality concept when you're dealing with older people. Because when you're a little younger, you're right, you're not really thinking that way. So thank you for that.
It seems so far in the future, doesn't it? And it seems so far removed from you.
Yeah. But it's not. But it's not though. Yeah. Do you notice any challenges in the way senior leaders communicate their family business vision to the different generations in the family?
When you say to the different generations, you mean like they have different communication styles with the different generations? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Do you find any communication challenges when the senior leaders speak to the young folks? Um, and maybe it's not just a matter of different generations, but those in the family that are going through different seasons.
Oh yeah, for sure. There are communication challenges from the founder towards the younger generation as well. I think a lot of it again is down to this different perspectives that they have. The founders built the business from scratch, have rose from humble beginnings, have taken on a lot of risk and have a lot of self confidence in their ability to make and flip money. Whereas the younger generation tend to have a lot more anxiety about their business capabilities, tend to be more worried about financial security. And so when it comes to communicating the family business vision, just similar to my last answer, it's for the older generation to develop empathy for the younger generation. Another thing is no one wants to be preached at. Back to your question about can you be true to yourself and tend to the legacy of a family business? It would be ideal if we all feel that the business reflects a piece of us. So it's a reflection at any given point in time of all the family members. And we're collectively constructing this thing together. We're painting this picture together, as opposed to I'm being preached that this is my vision for the family business and all of you are here to implement my vision. It's there'll be no ownership, there'll be no interest, there'll be no passion. So it's really about moving from a unidirectional positional leadership to going towards more collaborative style of leadership, even in the family. So listening to what everyone's opinions are, both old and young, both male and female, both different factions of the family. It's important that everyone's views are truly reflected because I do believe that diversity of thought is truly powerful, and we need to harness the best of both the old and the young, male and female, to be able to come up with the best quality and quantity of ideas in this world where we're seeing that it's increasingly difficult to do business. We're laden with so many social challenges. Family businesses have a very strong sense of accountability and responsibility towards solving social challenges, whether it's in their local communities and what have you. And so we have to move away from preaching at the younger generation to including them and listening. What do they really feel about this at this point in time?
Yes. Preaching to the choir here, I totally agree. Any recommendations on how family businesses can make the business more professional by establishing employment standards for both family and perhaps non-family employees?
Yeah, this is usually a common area where it gets quite tricky and a huge source of conflict. It's really just to professionalize and standardize as much as possible, have a HR manager, have clear job descriptions, even for family members, even if they're only working 10 hours a week, have clear understanding of expectations, have clear understanding of pay, and pay should be based on what is market rate. Again, when we speak to pay, for instance, if you hire your daughter to come in and assist with marketing, well, assist is the wrong word, to work in the marketing division. When you make payments to her, in what capacity are you paying her? Are you paying her a gift because she's your daughter? Are you paying her a wage because she's your employee? Are you paying her a bonus because she's done well as an employee? Or are you paying her a dividend because she's a part owner? And it's important to ensure that you differentiate between each line item. Otherwise, what may happen is, say, for instance, you have a son who's not working in the business and you give him gifts. And you're giving your daughter the same amount as you're giving your son. Meanwhile, she's working. You can see it will cause issues in the future. So it's just really to have a clear understanding that we're building a legacy business, and building a legacy business doesn't start overnight. You start with the end in mind, and you have to start building this. If the height of the building denotes the longevity of the business, we have to ensure that the foundation is really sturdy and take our time in ensuring that we're building a strong, firm foundation. And that really is HR and culture.
Nike, if you had a family business that was looking to establish some employment standards, there's so many. Where should they start? What would you recommend as the top 3 standards they should get in place immediately?
Okay. I would say, what is the entry requirements for family members to work in the business? Is it any different from non-family? Do they go through the same recruitment process? And this is no judgment here. It really depends on your values and the purpose of the business. For some business owners, a strong purpose of the business is to create employment for family. And so if that's the case, you might have relaxed policies for family members compared to non-family, but having clarity as to what are the criteria for those family members that are coming into the work in the business. Do they require work experience elsewhere? Do they require, formal education of some sort? Do they require any competencies, any character, and what have you? It's to get very clear on that. Another thing that I would say is, like I said, being very clear on remuneration. It's absolutely clear to have offer letters, to have employment contracts with the scope agreed by both parties. Because what tends to happen is, in a family business, we can take our family members for granted, and there can be an informality where there's an evolution of scope. Yes, you came in assisting with marketing, and then we needed someone else to build a financial model. And then over time, suddenly Jessie is working 60 hours a week and she's being remunerated for just 10. And she's getting extremely demoralized and bitter about all the work she's doing. That will have an impact on the family relationship. And yeah, it can get quite dicey. So being very clear about remuneration, being very clear about job descriptions. And then when it comes to annual appraisals and things, ensuring that it's done by an independent person. So family members should not be appraising each other, because on the side of the next generation, right, from an outsider's perspective, one would think that, oh yeah, that's great, your mom's appraising you. No, the next generation also wants to prove themselves. They want to be sure that they're being fairly appraised, because there's a lot of insecurity as to, did I really earn this? Do I have a right to be here? Is it because of my surname that I'm truly here? And so it's really important that a third party comes in and does that assessment and gives them independent feedback on that. Another thing that I would say as well is, as much as possible with family businesses, is to have a mentor or a coach on a one-on-one basis for both the founder and for the next generation.
Wow. So it's amazing to learn that some of the struggles that the family business is going through, and how there are some similarities when it comes to corporate America. Right? When is it okay to terminate a family member?
When is it okay to terminate a non-family member? You know, the thing is, you can stop working in the business, but you can't stop being a family member. You can become an estranged family member, right?
Yeah.
But there has to be a delineation in the minds of both sides as to Nike as the daughter and Nike as the employee. There has to be boundaries in place to know that. And when you have boundaries in place and you have clear demarcation as to, I am speaking to you as your daughter and not as your employee, it becomes, it's not easy. You take it less personal if, heaven forbid, you have to be terminated. The truth is business and family is family. Business is about profits, productivity, performance. Family is about unconditional love, security, and acceptance. So they're completely different institutions. And if we create a culture where we demarcate and delineate between both institutions, it becomes easier to be able to make those strictly business decisions whenever it's right for the business, is what I would say.
The reason that I asked that, of course, I have my own interpretation of what the answer should be, but I was thinking, if this is a quote unquote family business, I was assuming probably family members would never want to get rid of each other or remove each other from the business. And instead of termination, maybe if there was an issue, maybe you get demoted. You get demoted, promoted, but never terminated.
There are instances, though, where you do have to terminate. For instance, if there's fraud, because it's family, we can take each other for granted. And those that are in finance, there's been a lot of studies about a high incidence of fraud in family businesses by family members. So in that instance, it's criminal. We would have to put a foot down on that and terminate the person in question.
Okay.
Another instance is if, say, for instance, you're enabling behavior that's detrimental to the person's life. For instance, they're not turning up to work on time. Perhaps there's an addiction issue. Perhaps there's a mental health issue. It's important to get to the root of it. And it's not the terminations done out of lack of compassion. The termination is done also to protect the individual.
Okay, thank you for that. Any final words of wisdom for family members who are trying to grow their family legacy?
Yeah, I would just say be patient. Building a legacy business, it doesn't take a day. Rome wasn't built in a day. And similarly, all the hard work that you're putting in is sowing seeds. And you're sowing seeds for a tree that might bud, and that might not be in your generation, but to just keep being patient, keep tilling the soil, keep putting in the work, and inviting as many family members as possible to join you on that journey. They may choose to join you in different capacities. Some may choose to join you out in the battlefield. Some may choose to join you from the sidelines. But the more minds you have together in this process, the better quality you'll see.
This was such a great conversation, Nike. Before we end the show today, let the audience know how they can follow you and follow your work.
Thank you. My website would be the best place. It's got everything there. So my contact details, my socials, etc. And that's nikeanani.com, www.nikeanani.com.
Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you so much.